Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 25 series, Can We Save the Oakland A's? And our efforts to save the A's largely failed here in 2037. We were trying to win back-to-back World Series titles. We ended up at 93 and 69, second place in the American League West after having the best record in baseball well into July. And unfortunately, we were bounced in two straight games by our division rival, Texas Rangers, in a wild card series that we hosted. Only 2 runs and 10 hits for the A's in those 2 games. Our offense had went from best in the league to middle of the pack over the second half of the season, and our inability to score runs came back to cost us in our brief visit to the playoffs here in 2037. So after we got bounced from the playoffs, we did our annual roster review and started planning for the offseason last episode. We still have to find out who's the World Series champion this year, though. The Chicago White Sox are going to be facing off against the San Diego Padres in the 2037 Fall Classic. But before we find out who the World Series champion is this year, we're going to take a look at some of the top prospects around baseball, some of our former players, and also our farm system, and see how we are doing in terms of hopefully developing the next wave of talent that will keep this Oakland Athletics franchise that has made the playoffs in 7 of the last 9 years now, with a couple of World Series championships. The players that will hopefully keep us competitive for many years to come, despite the fact that we still are not in a particularly favorable financial situation with this team. And we'll start things off with some of the more interesting prospects in baseball that we or members of the Worldwide Scouting Department have considered drafting in recent drafts. Center fielder Alvaro Cepeda, number 55 prospect in baseball. He was an international free agent signing almost 4 years ago at this point. Made his very brief major league debut with the Guardians this year, 4 for 14 with a homer and 2 ribbies. So very productive while he was there. They jumped him all the way from A-ball, where he was good, to the majors this year. Now out with a ruptured MCL. It's only October 25th, so he's likely to be able to participate right at the end of spring training, perhaps, and hopefully won't miss too much time when the season begins. Our major issue with Carney Cepeda was some very negative personality traits, but certainly looks like he could be a solid offensive player if he reaches his full potential. Butch Wall, 23-year-old who was picked in the 2033 draft, still has only made it to A-ball, hit 249 with 20 homers and 51 ribbies this year, so good production for 257 at-bats, but he's still struck out about 40% of the time. 155 WRC plus is certainly impressive for A-ball, but a 23-year-old who was the 24th overall pick 4 years ago at this point, you would hope that would be higher than the Carolina League at this point. Sawyer Wenda, a right fielder who was a first-round pick in 2034, still hasn't made it out of rookie ball. Hit just a .94 this year with a 79 WRC plus. He'll be 22 years old when next season is getting started. Looks like he could still be a decent contact hitter, but he's got a lot of work to do, and for whatever reason, the Rays organization has not moved Dokuban of Kishu higher than rookie ball. Bobby Vermillion, I was very concerned about his contact and his avoid strikeouts when we were looking at him in the draft back in 2032, and those things are still very significant issues. hit just a buck 77 with over 200 strikeouts in high A ball for the Blue Jays organization. Does not look like Mr. Vermillion is going to end up being much of a major league prospect at almost 24 years old. Greg Grace is a college player out of Florida State that we just looked at in the most recent draft. He hit 280 with 2 homers and 9 ribbies in 82 at-bats in AAA. Also had 10 doubles and a couple of triples, so pretty solid extra base power with 14 of his 23 hits being extra base hits. Put up a 109 WRC plus at 22 years old. Would certainly expect him to not be repeating rookie ball next year. Mr. Magnificent is a guy we will continue to track and see if he becomes as effective as his nickname suggests he may be. And last but not least, Cameron Rhodes, a player that we considered a year ago in the draft in 2036. He went 24th overall. Spent this year in rookie ball, hit 230 and 309 at-bats, 81 WRC plus. He'll be turning 20 before next season starts. According to our scout, still has potential to become a pretty interesting hitter with good outfield range and pretty solid speed, even though he only stole 1 base this past year. There's also a few pitchers we've been following, although as you can see by their potential, not sure how long we're going to continue following them. Jesus Escobar, claimed on waivers from San Diego this past summer, split the year between multiple stops in the minors as well as Pittsburgh and Baltimore in the majors. Was not particularly good at either level, barely above replacement level overall, with a 4.31 ERA with the Pirates and an ERA of over 6 with Baltimore. Escobar looks like he is a borderline major league pitcher. Edison Faulo, 21-year-old out of Canada, almost 22 years old, and he's still playing in rookie ball. He was 4-1 with a 2.90 ERA and 116 strikeouts in 87 innings. So very effective to be in rookie ball. But this is a player who was drafted in 2034, 31st overall by the Yankees organization, traded to the Pirates organization, and parts of 4 seasons in the minor leagues, and he still hasn't played above rookie ball, so certainly not developing as quickly as the Yankees and now the Pirates organization would hope. Josh Kiesler, a 19-year-old who we looked at in the draft last year. His lack of control was a big concern for us. It doesn't look like that's going to get any better, although his stuff still looks interesting. 0-5 with a 6.47 ERA in rookie ball for the Giants organization. 6 home runs and 28 walks allowed in 32 innings pitched. He did strike out 42 batters, but looks like that control and his inability to keep the ball from landing in the stands 400 feet away are going to be significant limiting factors on Kiesler's success. We'll turn now to some major leaguers and some of our former players, guys that we've been tracking over the years. Still sticking on the pitchers, Andres Rojas, the knuckleballer that we wish we had drafted with we were hoping to draft with the 53rd pick in 2027. Obviously, in retrospect, wish we had drafted him with our first round pick, although he's now making $55 million a year for the Marlins organization. 6-time All-Star, 1-time Cy Young Award winner with 17-10, 2.54 ERA this year, 245 strikeouts. 82% of his starts were quality starts and put up a 6.1 WAR. That knuckleball remains a very effective weapon for Mr. Rojas. Joe Lewin, a high school pitcher who came up through our organization. We traded him away for a rental of Brian Ramos. This is not a trade that worked out well for us. 13-6 this past year with a 3.16 ERA, put up a 6.3 WAR as a starting pitcher. Lewin certainly has developed better than we thought he would when we traded him away, and is a good young pitcher. Another pitcher we traded away is Tim Killeen. We traded him away as part of the Levi Sterling salary dump just about a year ago at this time, which some of you really did not like. Killeen ended up having a nice first year in Seattle, 3-4 record, but a 2.96 ERA over 67 innings, put up a win above replacement. And only allowed 5 home runs in 67 innings pitched, so that was good. 28 walks and 70 strikeouts, so a pretty solid first season for Mr. Killeen. Levi Sterling, and in getting Levi Sterling off the books was the main reason we made this trade, and included some talent. Sterling, looks like they must have just cut him because he had a guaranteed, I feel like he had a guaranteed contract with us. Wonder what's going on there. Maybe he was only, no, we definitely signed him to a long extension. I guess somebody must have just released him. I'll go back to his history. Somebody must have just released him and taken the hit on his contract. Yeah, the Seattle Mariners released him before the season even started, amazingly, after he made that trade. So they just bought out his contract. So now he's a much more reasonably priced pitcher. But he did put up a 7.52 ERA this past season in 15 games with Atlanta. To be fair, in his 1 1/3 innings with the Mets, he was scoreless and didn't allow any hits or walks. But overall, still think it's good that we got Sterling off the team. Combined this year, had a 7.16 ERA over 27 2/3 innings for the Met and Brave organizations. Jonathan Niswanger, Purdue product that we thought about drafting a few years ago, split the year between AAA and the majors, a 5.34 ERA in 30 1/3 innings at the major league level, was basically a replacement level pitcher. Juan Aguayo, spent the entire year in AAA this year at the age of 30. Does not look like he's going to be a big-time prospect. He is a international player who came over from Cuba a couple of years ago. We were very reticent about looking at Aguayo because of his lack of stuff and his very unimpressive arsenal. And he hasn't really done too much, especially for his $7.2 million salary. So pretty glad we didn't go after him. And last but not least, but probably most sadly, Mason Miller, who had spent 2 years in the Korean League after he moved on from a long tenure in Oakland, now spent this entire year with the Jacksonville Jumbo Shrimp back in the United States. And he put up a 7.20 ERA over 133 2/3 innings pitched with the Jumbo Shrimp. Certainly doesn't look like he's got the arsenal to ever be a major leaguer again at this point. Kind of sad to see him playing at the age of 38 and 39 this past season in AAA with the Jumbo Shrimp after the really nice career that he had in Oakland. And we'll turn our attention now to some familiar names among hitters. Shohei Bame, international player out of Japan we thought about signing several years ago. Moved on to the Washington organization from the Dodgers this past season. Hit .227 with 27 homers and 74 ribbies, 110 WRC plus and a 1.8 WAR. So for a guy making pretty big money, not a ton of productivity for the 34-year-old. Byron Brain, the catcher that we traded away to the Marlins a few years ago in the deal that brought us the pitcher Patterson, as well as the first baseman, Mr. Brailovsky. Hit 206 with 145 strikeouts and 277 at-bats this year, as we kind of thought he's got a big struggle keeping his average above the Mendoza line, and he strikes out an insane amount of times, so we were very glad to get some value for him a few years ago. Sergio Figueroa, 273 average, 20 homers and 66 ribbies for Houston, the team that beat us in the American League West this year. Put up a 124 WRC plus and a 2.6 WAR. Figueroa was traded away when we rented Brian Ramos a second time after that trade we made with the pitcher Lewin that we talked about earlier. Bertrand Albrighton, once one of the top prospects in our organization, split this year between AA, AAA, and the majors with the Kansas City organization. Did hit 308 and 78 major league at-bats. Love his personality, but certainly looks like a guy who probably got a bit lucky to have hit 308 this past year. His 423 BABIP would also indicate that there was probably some luck involved as well. Burner Cabral, once a big-time slugging prospect in our organization, split the year between AA, AAA, and the majors in the Seattle organization. Hit just a $176 with 141 strikeouts in 307 at-bats for the Mariners this year, more than a win below replacement level. So Cabral was another salary dump that we were involved in. Looks like he has also just been released by somebody who was willing to, the Mariners organization, I guess, who was willing to suck it up on his contract. We were not willing to do that, and glad that we didn't have to make the decision to just kind of eat a big contract on Cabral. Arturo Estrada, left fielder John Thomas, hit 255 in 526 at-bats for the Twins this year, a 69 WRC plus, just a win above replacement. Hasn't become quite the hitter that we hoped he would when he was an important international amateur free agent signing of ours many years ago. And Kevin Stubblefield, he's a guy who hasn't been cut yet, still working on that 10-year, $25 million contract that we signed him to, traded him to the Red Sox organization when we didn't like how things were going with him. He hit 310 in Worcester this year, 355 at-bats, and was 1 for 3 in a very brief stint in the majors for Boston. And while we've talked a lot about our past, some good decisions and some bad decisions that we've made over the years in the draft and in the trade market, time to start talking about our future. And our minor league system really had a good year this year. We finished the year ranked 5th out of 30 teams, and we've got a boatload of top 100 prospects. Luis Godina is viewed as the top prospect in our organization right now. IAFA signing from 2033. Did a really nice job in A-ball this year. Hit 282 with 9 homers and 26 ribbies and just 142 at-bats. Definitely struggled when we promoted him to high A-ball, though. Hit just a $156 in 122 at-bats there. Still looks like he could be a versatile defensive player with a bat that, if he reaches his full potential, could be pretty interesting. He's already pretty good at drawing walks, only 21 years old. Still think there is potential for Godina to become an important player for us. Ernesto Camuñez, this is a top prospect that I know several of you have been talking about in the comments to recent episodes. Really excited to see what the IAFA signing of 2035 becomes. Unfortunately, his season this year was cut short in early August by a torn rotator cuff, but The recovery is only another couple months from now, so I guess it was not a particularly severe torn rotator cuff to basically be a 4.5 month kind of injury. He was 9-2 in A-ball this year as a 19-year-old with a 2.19 ERA, 1-0 in 2 games in high A with a 1.86 ERA and 13 strikeouts in 9 2/3 innings before he injured himself. So a combined 4.3 WAR between A and high A for a 19-year-old is really impressive. Basically just need to hope that he comes back from that injury still with a normal injury proneness and basically with the same profile and potential that he has now, because he looks like he is on a very fast track to the major leagues. Excellent stamina, great personality, throws in the mid to high 90s. Definitely a premier prospect for our Oakland A's organization. Shortstop Jorge Castillo is a guy who has kind of come out of nowhere. Hit just 200 and 170 at-bats in A-ball this year. But he is a guy that we picked up in a trade with Seattle right before the trade deadline in 2036. The trade where we dumped Bobby Cabral and had to include Shiloh Solis to pick him up. We did get that rental of Yanquiel Fernandez in the deal. But Castillo was honestly not really a big-time prospect, we thought when we were picking him up. But our scout thinks that his potential is just kind of going through the roof. So it may be someone that we just get very lucky with. You can see just incredible June, July, and September 2037 projections from our scout on what he can potentially become. Who knows whether he'll end up reaching that full potential, but certainly nice to have lucked into a guy who looks like he could be a pretty big prospect. David Palomares, who was our prime IAFA signing this past year, listed as the number 47 prospect in baseball, but we kept him in the complex this whole year at the age of 17. Juan Pimentel, a 21-year-old, soon-to-be 22-year-old IAFA signing from 2033, had a monster year for us in A-ball this year. Didn't look like he was quite ready for high A-ball, but he was so good we had to promote him right near the end of the year just to see how he did after he'd basically spent 2 full seasons in A-ball. Hit 230 at-bats in high A, but did have 2 homers, 5 ribbies, and 5 steals. Looks like he could be a pretty interesting hitter as well, and is a guy who's got some speed and defensive versatility, also durable, so still interested in seeing what Pimentel will do over the years. Mike Blumenshine was our first-round pick from 2036, only pitched in 3 games in his first year in the pros before he got injured. Was healthier this year and was a combined 6-6 between rookie ball, A ball, and high A ball. Had a 0.61 ERA and just 5 hits allowed with 20 strikeouts in 14 2/3 innings at high A, which was the highest level he made it to. Still think that the left-hander could be a pretty solid major league pitcher in the not-too-distant future. He'll be 23 years old in less than a month and would have to think that he'll be starting this upcoming year in Double-A. Darnell Selvey is our final top 100 prospect and the 7th top 100 prospect we have. Selvey, a first-round pick in 2035, split the year between A and high A, put up a 171 WRC plus in A-ball and a 124 WRC plus and 146 at-bats in high A, combined for 20 home runs and 61 ribbies between the 2 levels. Still looks like he could be a pretty interesting hitter down the line. We also have 3 prospects ranked between 101 and 200. Amare Alcindor, former 8th-round pick, is a guy who looks pretty close to major league ready as an infielder at this point. Bat that looks respectable, decent speed, good bunter, and a pretty solid glove, although his arm is not that impressive. Hit .274 with 26 homers and 78 ribbies in Double-A for us. Promoted him to Triple-A towards the end of the year, where he hit .296 and 71 at-bats. Added another 3 homers. Was an above-average offensive player at both levels, combined for a 4.6 WAR. He'll be 24 years old early next year. Certainly is a guy who will be competing for a major league roster spot next year. We talked in the last episode about how third base was a potential open competition for us. We've got the recently acquired Dolan. We've got Mr. Mesidor, who we picked up a couple of years ago. Not suggesting with Alcinder's arm that he's going to be a prime third baseman for us, but conceivably we could consider, if Alcinder is the best bat of the contenders, perhaps putting Alcinder at second base and then maybe moving all-star second baseman Alejandro Landin, who does have a better arm, over to third base. That could be a way for us to potentially boost our offensive production a bit in the infield this upcoming year. Andres Vigo, picked him up with a supplemental first-round pick in 2034. Didn't love the personality, but felt that there was some value there. The 21-year-old progressed from rookie ball to A ball this year, combined for 25 homers and 59 ribbies at the 2 levels. Was a well above average offensive player at both stops. Not the greatest defensive player, not a ton of speed, and as we talked about, not the best personality. Still looks like he could develop into a pretty good power hitter, though, and he is durable. Honestly, he's someone who, somewhere down the line, I could see myself using him as trade bait, more than someone who I think we're going to end up building him around, but good to see that he still does have some value. And our final top 200 prospect is the center fielder Jesus Aguilar, IAFA signing from 2034. Split the year between rookie ball, where he was an absolute monster, and then A ball, where he was a bit above average offensive player. The left-handed hitting center fielder, decent range, decent speed, and a bat that we still think could be useful at the major league level if he comes close to reaching his full potential. We won't go through all the rest of our prospects, but want to cover a couple of key guys. First baseman Greg Moreno, third-round pick from 2034. Split the year between A ball and high A, combined for 16 homers at the 2 levels. Was an above-average offensive player at both levels. Still looks like he could be a useful offensive player down the line. Probably more of a first base, left field DH type than anything else. Mike Homer, you may remember him, a second-round pick from 2036. Potential two-way player, 19 years old. Had a full year in rookie ball this year, 2-5 with a 5.97 ERA as a pitcher. So that is not going particularly well at this point. As a hitter, a little more productive there. Hit .250 with 8 homers, 31 ribbies in 248 at-bats. Also hit 18 doubles. Still slightly below average as an offensive player, but was much more representative as a hitter in the ACL this year than he was as a pitcher. Last guy we'll take a look at here is Federico Areola, second-round pick in 2034. 3-4 with a 3 ERA in 60 innings in A ball for us after we promoted him from rookie ball earlier this year. Looks like he could be a useful back of the rotation starter if everything goes well. Certainly no guarantees that he's going to make it, but still a guy who seems to have a chance here 3 or 4 years into his professional career. And the final guy we'll check in on isn't listed as one of our top prospects, but he was our first-round pick in the draft this past year. That's Chris Jensen, starting pitching prospect out of Grambling. Sourface Jensen was 0-1 with a 6.75 ERA in rookie ball. We still promoted him to A-ball, where he went 1-1 with a 5.03 ERA in 19 2/3 innings pitched. Certainly not a great introduction to professional baseball in the first 6 games that he played for us, but he certainly looks like, on paper, like he was more than ready to handle the California League, and would have to think that there's a good chance that he'll be starting next year in high A ball. If things go well with Mr. Jensen in terms of his performance and his development, I don't think it's a stretch to think he could progress all the way from high A through double A and maybe even be in triple A at the end of next year. But he's obviously going to have to perform better on the field for that to be a realistic path. And before we find out who is going to win the World Series this year and start the off-season, one other thing that's recently been asked for and that I promised to do that we haven't done in a few years was to review the decision history of some of our key decisions over the years. Thinking about our acquisitions in the best acquisitions versus our greatest losses, you can see generally much bigger numbers in the best acquisitions than we have in the greatest losses. So that is positive in general. Clearly, our draft pick of Jake Ortega with his 37.6 career WAR, the best decision that we've made. The trade for Jackson Ferris, who we could be looking to move on from this offseason if he's willing to waive his 10-5 rights. The best trade that we've made, traded away a couple of young prospects. Dave Weston, who's actually with Houston, the team that just beat us in the AL West this year. And Andy Scott, who looks like he's bouncing between AAA and the majors, were the 2 young guys that we traded for Ferris, along with some experienced major leaguers as well to get him. But we gained 24.6 WAR in that deal so far. We gained 20.7 WAR in the trade for Andy Toribio. He was definitely a guy we were intrigued by, but certainly didn't seem like a can't-miss prospect when we picked him up. That was the decision we made to move on from Cruz Schoolcraft, who was a incredibly high draft pick for us in a very poor decision. 10th overall in the second draft we did in 2025. We got a little bit of value back in that trade for him, and it ended up being a lot of value, obviously, with Taribo and what he's done. And we also picked up more than 20 in the trade where we picked up Brian Rincon from the Phillies organization. Rincon was a pretty important shortstop for us over the years. 2 other trades that were very positive. The monster trade for Colt Keith, who will also probably be moving on from a second time after this season. And then the trade that got us prospect Luis Lara very early in this playthrough. The worst trade that we made was the bailing on Jacob Misiorowski very quickly. We got Esteban Meza in return. He's actually back in our organization now. We lost him in the Rule 5 draft, but he's been returned to us just a few weeks ago. But we lost 17 WAR in that trade, so getting rid of Misiorowski was a poor decision for us. Honestly, he really just had 1 or 2 monster years as a starter in his late 20s, early 30s with Colorado. So I guess it's actually 3 really big years that he had. But we're always worried about the walks that he was going to give up, and he actually did lead the league in walks each of those 3 years. But over the course of his major league career, 118 ERA plus, 94 FIP minus, and a WAR of almost 15. And we didn't really give up all that much when we brought him on board, but we quickly bailed on him, so that was not great. We've lost 12.7 WAR in the trade where we traded away Joe Lewin as well as others to get the rental for Brian Ramos. We talked about that one already when we went over Lewin. Clearly that did not work out well for us. And also a big war loss when we traded Brett Harris away very early in this playthrough along with Junior Perez for Austin Gauthier. Harris ended up having a few pretty solid major league seasons. Looks like he is now 39 years old and playing in Korea at this point. We had also picked up Roderick Arias, and we let him go away on a waiver claim when we waived him once, and he has gone on to have a pretty solid career as well. So some good hits, some painful misses, but overall, again, when you look at the size of the green numbers compared to the size of the red numbers, and we kind of do the same thing when we look in the best trades and the worst trades, all else being equal, more of our decisions seem to have worked out positively than not. And with that, it's time to find out who's going to win this World Series. The 93-win White Sox, AL Central winners this year, second in runs scored, fourth in runs against in the American League. The 98-win San Diego Padres, the best team in the National League, seventh in runs scored, first in runs allowed. So they actually had a pretty similar profile to what we did this year. We were ninth in runs scored in the American League, but we were first in all of baseball in the number of runs that we allowed. So be interesting to see what a team like the Padres can do against the White Sox, because it seems like they are built similarly to our Oakland A's squad. And the San Diego Padres are your 2037 World Series champions, a pretty strong 11-3 run during the postseason. They swept the Mets out 3-0 in the division series. Hard-fought 6-game series against the Braves in the NLCS, and then they took the World Series over the White Sox in 5 games. So congratulations to the Padres on their World Championship. And with that, it's time to get the offseason underway. One posted player from Korea, Sung Yong Kim, a 28-year-old starting pitcher. Looks like kind of a fourth or fifth starter type with an unpleasant personality, and it's going to cost a fair amount of money to bring him on board, so probably not someone that we will be involved in. Development facilities are open, going to have a lot of work for us to do there. Arbitration period has begun. Take a look at how many arbitration eligible players we have this year, and it's a pretty significant list. Bobby Garland, R.J. Cope, Kamani Banner, Camden Reisinger, Jaden Boakai, Juan Ramos, Rodney Mesidor, Andy Brailovsky, and Luis Taveras. I think it's unlikely we'll bring all of them back. That being said, I think most of them will be back with us in some capacity next year. Could also look to trade away a player or two if there's some value there. Our only major league free agent is going to be Colt Keith. We can potentially get compensation for him if we're willing to guarantee him $18.9 million, given that Mr. Keith is only looking for $2.2 million to come back, though. I don't think we're going to offer him a qualifying offer. Probably will let the veteran move on, even though we will take, in all likelihood, a hit to fan interest when he does move on. Got a couple of interesting decisions to make as far as pitchers. Jason DeCaro, who had an ERA of close to 7, a team option for $6.5 million, and Chris Carl, who had a 3.95 ERA in Oakland, also spent some time in AAA for us, his $4 million option as a left-handed reliever. I think it's going to be tough to bring back either of those guys next year. Take a look at a review of our season goals. We made the playoffs. He's content with what Jaden Boakai has done. He's not happy that we haven't signed an MVP. thinks that we've done good making that trade to bring Jorge Castillo on board. Impressed with our prospect pool. Not pleased with what we've done in fan interest. And overall, he thinks the team is well on its way to becoming all that he had imagined it could be. Happy with our performance, and his overall mood with our performance when he considers on and off-field success is delighted. Wants us to have a winning record, acquire an MVP, increase fan interest, and build a dynasty next year. So that sounds like a championship on top of a winning record. We have gotten our contract extended for 3 years, $1.2 million a year. And the big figure is going to be what the new budget is. We had a very successful financial year this past season and did make the playoffs. I'm hoping that will result in an increase to our budget. $190 million. So that is a $14 million boost from where we were last year. I don't think we're actually going to be able to keep all of these guys who have our player payroll at 21st, but that does move us up to 28th in budget. We were at 30th for the vast majority of this playthrough. I think the last couple seasons we've been 29th ahead of only Pittsburgh, and we will pass another team to be 28th in budget at $190 million next year. Let's take a look and see who is actually going to be behind us now in terms of their budgets for this upcoming season. And we'll be ahead of the Tigers by $2 million as well. Pittsburgh continues to fall their budget down to $156 million. So at $190 million, we will have the 28th ranked budget in baseball. The Yankees and the Dodgers both remain over $400 million. The Phillies, Mets, Rangers, Blue Jays, and Braves are all over $300 million here in 2037. So things certainly could have been better, but they also certainly could have been worse. Another playoff appearance, another reasonably successful season on the field. As we talked about, it was one of our most successful seasons in terms of profitability with over $10 million in profits. That did encourage Mr. Fisher to give us a nice boost in terms of our budget for this upcoming season. Clearly, some of the big decisions are going to be, do we try to trade away Jackson Ferris? Right now, he's still not willing to waive his no-trade clause, so not any options there as he heads into his final year. Andy Brailovsky, a big potential arbitration number next year. Jason DeCaro, the team option. Juan Ramos, Luis Taveras, Jaden Boakai, pretty big arbitration numbers. The team option on Chris Carl is a big decision. But really, Colt Keith, who we're likely going to move on from, is the only guy that we don't have signed for next year at this point. Clearly, we're going to be moving on from some other players to try to get the contract and the budget or the payroll a little more in line with the type of budget that we have. But the good news is that we can basically bring everybody back that we want to from this 2037 team and likely make the numbers work, assuming that we move on from Colt Keith and some of the guys with team options or arbitration years that we might decide aren't that important. I think that we're not in a bad position financially, and we should be able to open up some more cash over the next few weeks as we work through the arbitration process and maybe make some trades, because clearly we would like our scouting and development budgets to be a lot more than the figures that we have in there right now. So we're going to need to pare some salary at some point If we can move on from Ferris and trade, that would probably be optimal. But again, he does have those 10-5 rights. We knew we were taking a risk by letting those 10-5 rights vest last season. But as a team that was looking to repeat and looking to get back into the playoffs, we felt having our longtime ace on board made more sense than trying to dump him before he got those 10-5 rights. We'll see whether he ends up playing out his final year with us here in Oakland in 2038, or whether perhaps he's more willing to move on to a different organization in the next few months before we get to next season. And we will get the offseason started in our next episode when we start talking about some of those arbitration decisions, maybe see if there's anything interesting to do in the trade market, talk about our plans for the development lab. Always interesting to get the offseason underway, and that will be the focus next time around. Until then, thanks so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.